the advisory is meant to be looked at and taken in a higher grain than just thou shalt do environment. Because again, a lot of the FBI agents, a lot of the CISO that we've had here in the past that's still around, they're not on the plant floor. They're not walking. So it's easy to say, patch it. It's easy to say, replace it, but not always do they have the experience from how to do that. We talk in the past about it's easy to buy a tool, but how do you make the rubber meet the road and start using the tool, leveraging it, taking those insights from the data and making business risk decisions based on what your environment truly has.
Welcome to the Industrial Cybersecurity Insider. In each episode, we dive into the world of industrial cybersecurity. Join us as we cover the latest trends, innovations, and practical insights as we talk with leaders and practitioners across the industry. Gear up and let's get into this week's episode.
Hi, welcome. I'm Craig Duckworth.
Hi, this is Dino Busalaki.
So, Dino, a couple things. This last week, we had an FBI advisory. I think we should talk about that. It walks through some of the activities that we are seeing from other nation states, what organizations can do to begin protecting themselves, what they should look for. It mentions certain technologies. I think this would be a great topic because I think you and I have had conversations in the past. A lot of times, there might not be as much awareness from an OT perspective on an FBI advisory for something that InfoSec would be following up for, or InfoSec would be on the notes of the list for. So what do you think?
Yeah, that'd be good. I know we have an event coming up here in early September where we're actually the FBI is going to be presenting in the cybersecurity realm around these advisories and targets and probably some of the use case studies that they've uncovered over the past year or two. We know it's a big topic. I mean, you can hear leadership at the FBI talking about the amount of cases that they have open regarding bad actors that have been infiltrating into critical infrastructure and developing malware specifically for control systems.
Well, I think this one targets, or it specifically mentions some Cisco hardware, some Cisco router, switch routing platforms. So, we see a lot of Cisco on the plant floor. We see a lot of Stratix, which is Cisco branded. I haven't had an opportunity in the last 3 or 4 days to cross-reference which exactly piece of hardware this is and how often we run into it. But when we see IDFs and we see core backbones and we see MDFs splattered all through the manufacturing floor, Cisco is very prevalent. Most large organizations have a very large buying relationship through Cisco.
Right. Well, and the other thing that we witnessed, is that a lot of these control system networks that use this technology are not underneath the purview of the InfoSec or security teams at the client level, right? Meaning that the control systems have a DMARC. It's usually the PLCs or just dual NIC devices where they're able to separate logically IT from OT. And so you have those Cisco switches, those Stratix switches, and a myriad of other things that are down in that control system network. And we rarely find those in the asset inventory of whatever IT is using for their cybersecurity platform. Right, it's pretty common, right? And we as an organization, we focused on that, right? Is how do you encapsulate those assets that aren't necessarily being fed up to the OT cybersecurity or the IT security platforms. And sometimes the IT security platforms don't even have the necessary machine learning capability of those OT assets.
Well, another piece of that is if this alert, which came out, was a public service announcement, if it came to InfoSec or someone on the IT side and they took that and they passed it along to their team, would they have thought to send this to the OT operations? Would they have recognized that potentially the same Cisco hardware may be in the panels, maybe on the plant floor, running the same infrastructure, the same network down on the plant as it also is on the IT side or the corporate side?
Well, and then it's where you're into the skills gap, right? I mean, to be able to pass that information along to a group, because we hear a lot of times when we're talking to our clients, and specifically OT, because that's who we engage with traditionally, just from normal engineering control system work that we do, right? Building packaging lines, brownfield, greenfield expansions, lifecycle replacement, controls network. When you start talking OT cybersecurity to that group of people on the OT side, they know little to nothing about it, and they also have the mindset of, oh, that's cybersecurity, that's over in IT, right? And so there's not a good bridge between these two groups to be able to take this kind of information, infiltrate it down into that OT group, and then to be able to digest this information to see how they could actually make measurable impact based on those findings, right? They don't have the tools, they don't have the resources, they don't have the budget, they don't have skills. And so our organization has sat back and looked at that and said, we need to enter into that space, right? We need to be able to help our clients improve their cybersecurity posture and bringing that to the table. As we know, the challenge sometimes is getting those two groups to work really well together. And even if they have touch points where they have folks that have been designated to be on that OT cybersecurity space, it still takes a lot of information and knowledge about your plants to be able to implement something that can create a positive impact, right? The cost to do it, and again, back to the skills to do it, and just the breadth of it, right? If you got 30 or 40 plants in your fleet, having a couple people doing this isn't enough, right? I mean, you got to get electricians involved, and some people would say, why would I ever get an electrician involved? Well, the electrician knows everything you need to know about those panels, number one, and what's in them, right? And so they have a lot of inherent knowledge that helps, from the perspective of, if this is your target and this is what you're after, you need to leverage them in order to make sure that you are getting that full visibility, right? We hear that a lot. Clients say, I'm going to go get an OT cybersecurity platform and I want full visibility. And is north-south traffic sufficient? We know that it's not. You got to get after the east-west, and that's where the lines really start blurring when you start chasing that east-west stuff. And what the FBI is starting to present, which is great, they're trying to get folks involved from that OT space, mainly critical infrastructure, right, versus food and bev or certain other industries where they wouldn't set as a high priority compared to water, wastewater, power, oil and gas.
I would say maybe and maybe not. Look at, for example, food and bev. Several years ago when, was it JBS, the meat packer out of Brazil, they had a breach, they had an incident, and the meat supply in the U.S. was almost closed off, and it created some panic. I look at it and say, it still could have the same implications, and it will absolutely have the same implications on the manufacturing client, because if they're making whatever they make, if their facility is under an attack and they have an incident and they do experience downtime, their cost of downtime is going to be astronomical in relation to what it could be if this is a ransomware or this is a situation that's targeted. Normally, we see the nation state a little more sophisticated, and they're doing this to wreak havoc and to collect money. So it can absolutely cause some issues within any vertical that they target.
No, even it's the economic impact, right? I mean, shutting down an organization that's, could literally spend months trying to recover from a malware attack, and just the tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars that they can lose by being down. And just the impact of not only to the communities in which those plants operate on and the people that work there, but then the shelf space and the communities in which they serve. Some of them try to internalize it and try to take care of it internally, which is very difficult to do. If you're a privately held company, you don't have to even announce the fact that you've been breached, versus a public company that's got to let their investors and the SEC know that you've had a breach, so people can make informed decisions on their investments, for one, versus a private company that just wants to hide it and fight their way through it. And it's very costly. And most will just write a check to get the keys back. And we've seen those that have refused to do that, and they'll just fight their way through it for a year.
It's worth making note that the adversaries, they only have to get lucky one time. The clients that we deal with, the organizations that are trying to protect and secure their environment, they've got to be on point every single attack, every single day, all the time, because if they get in, whether that's through a phishing email and they did a social engineering compromise and they get somebody on the enterprise in a role to click something, and then they get into the environment and then they make their way in, they laterally move and they get to the manufacturing. They've realized over the last couple of years, manufacturing is a cash register. They turn it off. Organizations are going to do whatever it takes to write a check to turn the cash register back on. They have to have the product or there is no business. We see that time and time again.
It's the new frontier, right, in this space. It's regarding to, and the sophistication around being able to develop malware that can create havoc in these control systems is a space to everything you just said. And these groups are becoming more sophisticated. They're going to leverage AI to help them develop the technology to thwart these control systems. And they're very vulnerable. We know that, right? Control systems aren't patched on a regular, consistent basis. Sometimes they're never patched. Life cycle is much different for these assets. They're out there and measured in decades, not in just a few years. And so these adversaries are starting to realize what these vulnerabilities are and being able to make their way in. Just to even the work that we do, I mean, we usually find several different methodologies that are used just for remote access into a single plant. Again, if you got 30 or 50 plants in your fleet, now you're talking about a couple of dozen different avenues to gain access into those control systems that have been cobbled together by various groups. And you have I don't know if this is the right word, but you have a disinterested third party, and that's your SIs and your OEMs. Their role and responsibility in what they should be doing to assist and help their clients improve their cybersecurity posture, but none of them really think that way. They think that's the client's problem. That's their responsibility. But at the same time, they will stiff arm the client to make any measurable changes within those machine centers to implement some cybersecurity technologies to help them out overall, right? Not bringing anything to the table. The OEM and SIs are, number one. And number two, the client who might be trying to do something, who's maturing and trying to expand their cybersecurity posture, I haven't negotiated with them well enough to determine, can I put a collector in there? Can I swap out the switch and put a switch in there that allows me to run span? I want to put some type of monitoring technology in there. I want to know my risk and my vulnerabilities. I need to know my asset inventory. I need to follow the remote access in another environment. And that's why I say they're a disinterested party.
So let's talk about that for a second then. We are always big on, hey, asset visibility, the first step in this journey. You got to understand, you got to know what you have, you got to be able to see it. There are technologies today that give continuous asset visibility. They could take that inventory, they could understand, do they have these affected Cisco hardware in their environment? What's an immediate acceptable plan to begin remediating, removing those assets, securing that environment? And two, a piece that is important that we don't normally talk as much about in this environment, continuous monitoring. These technologies give continuous monitoring in the environment. If you can't fix it immediately because it's hundreds of thousands of dollars or takes time or you don't have the resources or whatever reason is, you should at minimum understand what your environment is, continuously monitor it for anomalies and see, is someone in that environment, and try and put in some basic micro-segmentation to protect and shield, back to that defense in depth strategy, those assets that you know are vulnerable and you know are being targeted, to try and do your best to protect your organization. People have to do that, at minimum.
It's like the FBI. They're stating that organizations should apply patches. It's a great idea, but in practice, you know what it takes to get that done. I mean, it's not like IT pushing out a patch that may or may not work. And even if it doesn't work, what's the true impact on that, right, per se? Or whatever disruptions it might have caused. And on the plant floor, on the other hand, we know that that can cause downtime. Right, it could cause safety issues, unplanned and scheduled downtime, loss of product, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so they would say that, right? Like anybody else, probably a CISO would say the same thing. Just patch it. And organizations are in a position to test that, to make sure that my machines still run the way that they're supposed to run if I just push a patch out indiscriminately. And most organizations are not set up in a manner to go through where they bring in their subject matter experts to sit down and go through this patching strategy to see what impact it has and see what it takes to deploy it and execute. And then have a backup plan if it doesn't work, right? And then when you look across your fleet, A lot of those aren't similar. Even though you may have Cisco switches out there, are they all running the same iOS? Is the applications that are running through those switches, are they the same? And the answer to that is no. I got Siemens in this plant, I got Rockwell in this plant, or I got a splattering of both of them, and I got Scalence in there, and I got Cisco in there, and then I got all these other switches that the OEMs and system integrators have put in there. And I think most organizations, when they sit back and look at it, it becomes overwhelming to them. And then from an IT perspective, it's like, I can't manage that. I can't execute that.
Well, it goes back to, from an IT perspective, they don't own the assets. They don't have the skill sets, the knowledge, and the experience to go down, nor the authority to go down on the plant floor and affect change for assets that they don't have responsibility for. But also, the advisory is meant to be looked at and taken in a higher grain than just thou shalt do environment, because again, a lot of the FBI agents, a lot of the CISOs that we've had here in the past that's still around, they're not on the plant floor, they're not walking. So it's easy to say patch it, it's easy to say replace it, but not always do they have the experience from how to do that. We talk in the past about it's easy to buy a tool, but how do you make the rubber meet the road and start using the tool, leveraging it, taking those insights from the data and making business risk decisions based on what your environment truly has. So it's that theoretical or that academic approach that says, here's the best way to fix it. I think that any organization would say, I would agree, that is the best ways to fix it. I can't do that. I don't have the luxury to do that because of X, Y, and Z. It takes me 6 months. It's going to cost me $3 million, and I don't have the staff to do it. So how can I apply something else, compensating control, to figure out a different way? That's the issue, I think.
People that are used to working in plants every day, all day, those should be the resources that you need to tap into in order to be successful in improving your cybersecurity posture, right? The S&MP stuff, and the particular FBI advisory that came out, simple network management protocol, all those switches out there, a lot of them have that capability, but they're not set up, or they're set up incorrectly. And I would argue, I just went through this the other day with a very large beverage manufacturer that's got several hundred of switches that aren't being monitored at all by the corporate IT, SOC, InfoSec teams. And now it's coming into, I need to go look at the S&MP protocol, how it's configured, how it's set up, those community strings, rights, privileges and rights to users. You have to go through all of those switches to go figure out how they're set up and or configure them to get them where you need them to match your cybersecurity strategy that you're putting in place, right? And one, you have the OEMs and SIs. That's one problem. The other one is you've got to get people in the plant level to be able to determine whether those applications are going to be impacted or affected by this. They don't even know. IT doesn't know, and the plant people don't even know. And so you have to be able to tap into organizations who do know, who can help you do this and have a demonstrable background to show that they've done this and that they do this.
Right. Right now, for organizations that are looking this, at very minimum, they should go back and say, hey, what is our incident response plan? Do we have the OT teams incorporated in that? If we know that we can't fix it that quickly, if we know we can't patch it, what is our plan in the event something does happen? Because the last place you want to create an incident response plan is in the middle of an incident.
Right. Well, this goes back to what I would say is that the CIOs and the CISOs for manufacturing organizations need to start building some type of relationship with what I call those disinterested parties. Find out who they are. We're spending millions and millions of dollars with these organizations to bring in technology to help you run your plans and support you when things aren't going very well. And I would argue that very few CISOs and CIOs know who their top 4 or 5 SIs or OEMs are in their manufacturing environment to determine what are their capabilities, what practices do they have, what partner relationships do they have with these, cybersecurity firms, for example, or networking firms, and try to learn more about what they can do to help them.
I was on site this week. This organization was looking to change some technology. They had one particular vendor, they had 8, count them, 8 individuals from this technology vendor in their office every single day, because that's how much of that technology they use, probably hundreds of millions of dollars. So it may be a little different, but you know and I know that if you build a manufacturing plant and your systems integrator, you spend $20 or $30 million on it, that CISO or the CIO probably doesn't know who it is, how to reach them. But if it were Microsoft, or it were Cisco, or it were Dell, or it were something that was in their purview, they would know. They probably have quarterly business reviews, understand what news coming down the road, how are they working on other stuff, how are they integrating AI, all the stuff that is important on the IT side. And if a tragedy happened on the OT side, I would struggle to say they could find the right person to call.
Well, for those that are looking to get started, even if you have started, it's like, well, how do you determine how good you really are, right? And I look at the FBI and what they're doing, even though they've got some inside intel that they can provide on the bad stuff that's going on. But I look at them just like a Price Waterhouse or Ernst & Young or Deloitte or some other consulting company out there who's saying, you need to go do this. And we can supply you the technology, but you're going to have to either figure out how to go implement and manage and support it yourself, or you're going to have to go find somebody who does, right? And that's a piece that's missing if you want to get started. And it goes back to, if you're a manufacturer, you should probably find out who your top system integrators are that are working in your plants. Would be a good place to start, and find out what their capabilities are and how they may or may not be able to help you.
Well, the public service announcement that the FBI issued, it's a, hey guys, we have some intel that we believe is accurate, and here's what it points to, and we think this is coming. We believe you need to take steps to protect yourself, to alert your staff, to begin doing things so that this doesn't affect you, because it can have a huge implication on the critical infrastructure, the manufacturing in the United States, whatever. But it's up to organizations. If you don't know how to do that something, or you don't know who to call that can do that something for you, it doesn't make a difference. Back to incident response, first off, what is our plan in the event this does hit us and we have a problem? How are we going to address it? Who do we call? Is it the attorney? Is it the CEO? Is it the engineer that's standing in front of the HMI that's going to turn everything off? What is the plan? They got to have that ready to go. So I'd say, to wrap this up, Dino, because this could be an all-day deal, organizations really need to have incident response plans that they can adhere to, they can follow, that they practice to make sure that they understand it. Know who some systems integrators are that are working in your facility today that can help you get the rubber on the road to try and do some stuff. And if you got questions, reach out, keep listening, ask us. We'll provide some information for you, whatever you need, but you got to do something now. You can't sit back and wait until an event happens to try and take steps to better yourself. It doesn't work that way.
Talk to your partners. Talk to your manufacturing partners.
Especially if you have manufacturing. Yeah. Great talk, Dino. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in to the Industrial Cybersecurity Insider. To stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to click the follow or subscribe button now. And if you found this podcast helpful or have a topic you'd like us to discuss, please leave us a review or let us know. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.